Welcome to the Woodridge Baptist Church podcast. For more information about what's happening in the life of our church, visit our website at www.woodridge.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Friends, I invite you to turn to Ruth chapter 2 as we continue the study of this short little book that, as we've been looking at over the last couple of weeks, it's 4 chapters of a book that actually, if you study it from the beginning to the end, you can see the entire sweep of the Bible from Genesis to Revelation contained in 4 chapters. Now that said, I've said before, go ahead and read the rest of the Bible. Don't just read 4 chapters of Ruth all the time, but it really is true. I want to catch up to speed for those of you that might have been out. So far, the book of Ruth has been a little bit cathartic. And if you don't know what that means, it's been like an emotional kind of roller coaster. And at this point, at least, from what we've looked at, it's been a lot of lows. You were introduced to a woman named Naomi, whose name means sweet delight. Her name is literally supposed to be a synonym for Eden itself. And what it means to live in Eden itself is just, she hasn't been living in Eden itself. Her husband, Elimelech, passed away. Her 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, they also died. The whole thing started with a famine in the land and that they were displaced and they had to go from where they were to another land so that they could survive. I mean, the bottom line is that's the beginning of a lot of drama. What do you think? That's heavy. And if you were living that, you would probably be sitting there going, I can think of other ways that I would like to live my life right now than all of this suffering and all the pain. And so Naomi had come to a place where the way that she looked at God, you saw this in Ruth chapter 1, was she looks at God and says, you have done this to me. Like, why have you cursed me? And that's a heavy moment. It's an honest moment, and it's a heavy moment. However, as we get into Ruth chapter 2, this thing is going to start to take a turn like a Hallmark Christmas movie. You know? Moabite girl from big city in Moab comes over and meets farmer boy. I don't know. I just threw that in there. She is going to meet a farmer boy. You're actually going to be introduced to him today. But I think to understand what we're about to talk about, let me give you a little bit of a setting. So Ruth and Naomi have come from Moab, and now they're in Bethlehem. You got to remember, both of them are widowed. Now, the rest of the story is set in an agricultural society. You do need to remember that. And there was a hint of that at the end of chapter 1 when it says, and the barley harvest was beginning. In other words, they were starting to have a harvest season. Now, here's the problem. You've got Naomi and you've got Ruth who chose to stay with Naomi and not to leave her. And what that means is as they're coming back into the land, there's a bit of a problem. Widows who don't own land or women that don't own land, they're in a bit of a precarious situation because their means of provision is often connected to the family that they married into and the land that they are connected to through that marriage for their provision, whether it be for both what you grow and you eat, but also for what you sell. Now, the good news is if you were an Israelite woman, the situation was a little bit better for you than at least the surrounding cultures. Now, the reason for that is something that you find in Leviticus 19. If you were to read Leviticus 19, I know you did this week, but still, let me review you. In Leviticus 19, there's what's called the law of gleaning. Now, the law of gleaning was something that God built into his law for the provisions of people that were like poor and widowed and orphaned. Now, imagine that you're a farmer, okay? And you have this massive field with crops and whatnot, and you're there, and this is how you're going to eat, and it's how you're going to make your living, right? Now, Leviticus 19 said that they were to do what was called setting the edge of their land. And what that meant is that everything on the inside of what was set was theirs to use for selling or for eating. Now, everything that was outside of the edge of the land that you set was for the poor, the widowed, and the orphaned, for the people that were in a time of need. They could literally come onto your land, specifically that portion, not inside, but you could go to that portion of the land and you could take and you could collect and you would actually have a way to eat. That actually sounds like a good thing. Now, the word gleaning is also they would come in and they would collect the barley and whatnot as they were harvesting it. And as they were bringing it, some of it would fall off. They were not supposed to pick that up. Whatever fell off was also meant for those that were poor and had no means of provision. They were able to take the gleanings for themselves, and that way they had something to eat. Now, think about this with me for a second. All of this is setting up what's about to happen. Now imagine that you're a woman. And let's imagine that you don't have a means of provision for you or for your family. And so you come to a property where the edge is set and you have everything outside of it that you are, and you can, because of Leviticus 19, you can come and take it and you can use it for yourself. One of the things that this communicates, I want you to imagine her walking to the fields, and the field workers are there and they see her walking up and she's collecting from the gleanings. That's going to communicate something to them too. What it's going to communicate to them, the fact that she's gleaning means that there's something that's happened to her, that she doesn't have provisions. And that also means that she's vulnerable. And up walks Ruth. Now, let's begin the Hallmark story. In Ruth chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, it says, "So Ruth left and she entered the field to gather grain behind the harvesters." Now you know why she's doing it. "She happened to be in the portion of the field belonging to Boaz, who was from Elimelech's family." Now you stop for just a second. You've been introduced to Elimelech. He was the husband of Naomi that died. So now there's this guy named Boaz that shows up that's in the family. Now later, when Boaz arrived from Bethlehem, he said to the harvesters, "The Lord be with you," which, by the way, is exactly how I greet the staff every day. "And the Lord bless you," they replied, and that's how the staff replies to me. I'm kidding. Now, here's the thing. Boaz just makes his first appearance in the story. This guy just shows up. And the first thing that you learn about him is he's a landowner. That's kind of the obvious thing. He's come to check out, like, hey, how's it going out here in the harvest? But you also learn very quickly that this is a godly man. And you learn it because of the way that he speaks to the people that work for him and the way that the people work for him respond to him. This man has their respect. They know his character. So as you keep reading in Ruth chapter 2, verses 5 through 7, watch what it says. "So Boaz asked his servants who were in charge of the harvesters, 'Whose young woman is this?'" So obviously Ruth catches his eye. There's a couple of ways you could read this. Here was one. He looks over and he sees Ruth and he goes, "Who's that?" That would be one way of reading it. I don't necessarily think that's the way to read it, but obviously she caught his eye. Instead, he's like, "All right, so who's she?" So more curious than anything. And the servant answered, "She's the young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the territory of Moab. And she asked, 'Will you let me gather a fallen grain among the bundles behind the harvesters?' And she came and has been on her feet since the early morning, except that she did rest a little bit in the shelter." Now, wow, think about that. So she's very clearly identified as a Moabite. There's a long history between God's people and the Moabites. If you were, for example, just to read the book of Judges, Moab is one of Israel's chief oppressors. And now you've got one of them standing there taking your food, your gleanings, right? Kind of a modern day way of kind of making this pop for you just a little bit. Imagine that we go back to the height of the conflict in the Middle East, and you've got this property, you've got your gleanings around it, in America, of course, because we still glean, right? So you've got your gleanings around it, and you walk out and you find that there's a terrorist that's eating the food that's dropped. That's a lot about like how this would feel if you were to see a Moabite. There was a lot of very negative history between these two groups. But I want you to see the way that Boaz treats her. He instructs the harvesters to stay away from her and to keep her safe. Like she needs to be protected. In other words, what you've got from Boaz is a guy that understands you've got a woman here that's very vulnerable, and we're going to protect her in every way that she deserves protection. That's what we're going to do. So he says, I want you to protect her. You keep her safe. They even gave her water to drink because she had been working a long time at this point. They were giving her hydration. And then Ruth asks a question that's basically like this, like, why are you being so nice to me? And this is his response. He basically says, I hear what you did for your mother-in-law, which is Naomi, and so I respect you. Now remember, Naomi is his family. So Ruth, remember Naomi, the way that she responded, she says, look, all of this tragedy has fallen down on our family. And she looks at Orpah, who was married to one of her sons, and Ruth, who was married to her other son, is like, I just want you to go. Like, just go. Now, Orpah chooses to go her own way. But Ruth says, I'm not going to leave you. And in fact, the response that she gives is, I'm going to cling to you. It's the exact same word that she uses for Naomi as is used for a marriage when you go to Genesis chapter 2. They leave their father and their mother and they cling to each other. They hold fast to each other. She was basically saying to Naomi, no, I'm going to hold in like a covenant relationship with you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving. And so quit trying to push me away. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. What a great moment. But that says a lot, doesn't it? Because what that means is if you think about who Ruth is, Ruth has come out of Moab where they worship Chemosh. Now, Chemosh is like the god of war. It's the god of victory. And that makes a lot of sense when you think about the Moabites because they were pretty good about trying to conquer people and to take over people. They represented Chemosh very well. But Ruth says, that's not my people anymore. That's not my God anymore. Because I've chosen your God, you are now my people. And so don't push me away. I'm sticking through this thing with you. What a cool moment. Everybody needs somebody like Ruth in their life. And the reason that Ruth had what she had in her relationship with God was largely because of Naomi. I mean, everybody needs a Ruth and a Naomi, don't they? We just do. But if you look at the way Boaz responds to her, because I love this in Ruth 2:12, he gives her a blessing. He says, may the Lord reward you for what you've done, and may you receive a full reward from the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. He blesses her. You came to the living God, and you're now under his protection. And so in Ruth 2:14, at mealtime, Boaz told her, come over here and have some bread and dip it in the vinegar sauce. I think Boaz is from North Carolina. I mean, we lived up there for 9.5 years. And I remember when we were first going up to North Carolina and like I was in the interview process to be a professor, they were like, oh, he's from Texas. Let's take him out for some barbecue. And so we go out and their barbecue is number one, it's pork. And the second thing is they use vinegar for it. And I took a bite and I already knew how they made their barbecue, but I took a bite and I said, something's really wrong with this. And they laughed, and they were like, no, this is how a barbecue is really made. I said, well, the vinegar is really strong. I said, you clean your windows with vinegar. And boy, then the war was on. I was like, I'm not getting this job. I said, if you want barbecue, got to come to God's country, y'all. Anyway, so Boaz is like, here's some vinegar for you. And so she sat beside the harvesters and he offered her roasted grain. And I want you to pay attention. For those of you that mark in your Bible, underline this one. She ate and was satisfied and had some left over. Now, for those of you that are kind of trained in the sweep of the Bible, this probably made your ear just kind of perk up a little bit because the same phrase here, she ate and was satisfied and had some left over, is the exact same phrase that is used for two of the miracles of Jesus in the New Testament, specifically the feeding of the 5,000 and the feeding of the 4,000. If you were to look, for example, in Matthew's gospel, and I'll just kind of tell you the way it went down, you had at least 5,000 people that were there at this one time with Jesus. And some say it was only the men. It doesn't mention the women or the children. It could have been more. But what he does is he performs a miracle. And you remember, they don't have enough fish. They don't have enough bread. Jesus blesses this, and then they eat. And what it says is they ate, and they were satisfied, and they had some left over. This is the way Matthew records it. Now, Matthew was written for a specific audience. His primary audience for his gospel were Jewish people. And if you look very closely at the amount that was left over, it says that there were 12 baskets left over, meaning that the miracle that Jesus performed, there was a sign even in the miracle for the Jewish people. There were 12 baskets left over, just like there were 12 tribes of Israel. And Jesus is looking at them and saying, God has given you provision and grace through me. I'm here for you. You can be saved through me. He wanted the Jewish people that he was the Son of God. He wanted the Jewish people to see that he was the promised Messiah that the Old Testament had been speaking to all along. He wanted them to see that. And so the miracle was one for provision, but a sign for a greater provision in him. And then you have the feeding of the 4,000. Totally different people group, by the way, right? And if you look really closely at what the Gospels say, it says he fed them, and I know this won't surprise you, they ate, they were satisfied, and they had some left over. In the feeding of the 4,000, though, it says that there were 7 baskets that were left over. If you were to go back into the conquest narratives of the Old Testament, you had all of these tribes that were warring against the Israelites. You'll notice that there were 7 main tribes that were at war against the people of God. You had some splinter groups born out from them, but there were 7 dominant tribes. And so just like you have 7 tribes that war against the people of God and come against God himself, Jesus is giving them a miracle with a sign in it that points to something even for them. That the Son of the living God that was standing before them was their means of provision and grace through him. He wanted them to see that. The number 7 is also more than that. It's the number for wholeness and completion. That he was providing something through himself that was whole and complete, and it was for them. And everyone had some left over. All of this, by the way, is language for what it was like living in Eden. You know, that God had provided for them, and one of the ways that Genesis describes it and the way that Revelation 19, 20, and 21 describes it in the end when Jesus comes and restores all of creation is that it's a place of abundance. And here you've got, in the midst of brokenness and chaos, just a whole messy situation, you've got people that are tasting a little bit of heaven, a little bit of God's provision in the midst of all of the mess and the chaos. God is good. I mean, you remember the story, the way that it began with a famine in the land. Now you've got abundance. God is good. But I want to remind you of this as well. What Boaz did for Ruth, Jesus does for everybody. What Boaz provides for Ruth, Jesus provides for everybody. I mean, you're sitting there going, my gosh, man, this is just a dinner, right? I mean, it's just a dinner. Yeah, but it's a dinner that points to a promise. It's more than just a dinner. And when you look at it, at this part of Ruth, it shows something else to us that I want us to think about for just a little bit. You know, for some of you, God has given you a very specific vocation and calling in your life. Some of you are attorneys. Some of you are working in the oil and gas industry. Some of you in HVAC and, electricians. And we got all kinds of people sitting in here. But the truth is you see something in this moment with Boaz that I think that we should really take with us. Here we are this morning, we're the church gathered. Tomorrow morning, we're going to be the church scattered. You know what I mean? You're going to be teachers and lawyers and doctors and everything like that. All good things. It's what God has portioned for you. But you see something in this moment with Boaz where he walks up to basically be like, hey, I'm here to check on my land. See what's going on. After all, it's the barley season. And he gives a blessing to the people that work for him, but it wasn't just that. Did you notice how he saw Ruth in her time of need? And while he was there for work, there was a divinely portioned moment where he looks at Ruth and he gives her a moment with him. He gives her his time. He gives her his protection. He gives her his provision in just a normal work day. I'm convinced of this. We're supposed to have more Boaz moments on a Tuesday. I think we're supposed to have more Boaz moments on a Wednesday. I think just normal, small acts of obedience and grace where somebody that's right around us at work needs a blessing and we give it. I think that's something that we see in this story. God is often in the small things, right? He's often in the small things. Well, here's the way that it works out. Look at verses 15 and 16. When she got up to gather grain, Boaz ordered his young men, let her even gather the grain among the bundles. Now that wasn't normal, but whatever. Let her gather the grain among the bundles and don't humiliate her. Put out some stalks from the bundles for her and leave them for her to gather. Don't rebuke her. So Ruth gathered grain in the field until evening. This has been a long day for the girl, right? And she threshed what she gathered, meaning she separated the bad part from the good. She's keeping the good. And it was about 26 quarts of barley. Some would say that could roughly weigh about 30 pounds, give or take. So girl's done some work. And she picked up the grain, went into the town where her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and she brought out what she had left over from her meal, and she gave it to her. And her mother-in-law said to her, where did you gather barley today? And where did you work? And may the Lord bless the man who noticed you. May the Lord bless the man who noticed you. I want you to stop for a second. If you will go back to Ruth chapter 1, this same Naomi, after she loses her husband and her 2 sons, looks at God and says, you've done this to me. You have done this to me. You have cursed me. Don't call me my name. That's not the life I'm living. I live in a mess. Don't call me sweet delight. Don't look at me and say that I'm a symbol of Eden. My life is nothing like that. It's nothing like that. Call me Mara, because my life is just better. You remember her? Have you been her? Have you been her before? If you're honest, when you're really going through it, most of us feel like that. Right? If you pay close attention, may the Lord bless the man who noticed you. For the first time, we see that Naomi can see that God is not against her, but is actually helping her through the chaos. She's starting to see it. She couldn't before. She was caught up in the hurt. She was caught up in the grief. She was caught up in it to the point that maybe her feelings felt more powerful than the God that she loved and worshiped. But gave it a little bit of time, and she could see the providential hand of God working in her life. And Ruth gives an answer. She's like, who did this? Who's the guy? And she says, a man named Boaz. And then comes the hinge to the whole book of Ruth in one verse. If you look at Ruth chapter 2, verse 20, it says this. It says, then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, may the Lord bless him because he has not abandoned his kindness to the living or the dead. And Naomi continued, this man is a close relative. He's one of our family redeemers. Some of your Bibles would say kinsman redeemers. He's one of them. I just have to make sense out of that. I said that this is the verse on which the whole book hinges. This is the verse. I just have to make it make sense for a second. So she uses a word redeemer here. And what a redeemer was, is it was a person, it was really about a person that would take land ownership, and they would take land and they would return it back to its rightful owner. They were called a redeemer. Now picture this with me. If a family member loses their land, back then what that meant was you also lost your means of money and provision, both the food that you would eat and what you would sell for your profit. You were losing that. And so to bring them back in, what would have to happen is a redeemer would have to buy the land back, give it back to the family, and then they would be called a redeemer. Now, if you look at the backdrop a little bit, this is starting to make sense. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, has died. A lot of Old Testament scholars think that maybe probably what he had done was sold the land during the famine and before Naomi had to leave for Moab because of the famine. So now she's coming back. She has no way to get the land back on her own. And it's like, how are we going to take care of ourselves? It's not like we have the land to do it. However, if a blood relative at his own expense repurchases the land on their behalf, here's what this means. He has the responsibility to care for the land and for the persons that live on the land. In other words, when Boaz is saying, I'm going to take the land for you, I'm going to buy this back for you, that meant that they came under the protection of his wings. His means and his provision, not their own. They didn't have it. His means and his provision. So when you think about it, if you had a lot of debt back then, you only had a few options on how to get out of it. Here was one. You could sell your land, but man, that's not good, right? Sell your land. Then what goes with it is, well, your ability to keep working the land. But you might be stuck in a tough spot. Here's the problem for Naomi, not an option for her. It's not an option. The other option that you typically had back then was you could sell yourself into slavery. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't like either option A or option B. Are y'all with me? I don't like either one of those options, but here she is. When you look at what a redeemer would do, a kinsman redeemer, is they would rescue someone from enslavement or from having to become a slave. They would rescue them from that. And there's a Hebrew word for this. The Hebrew word for the redeemer is goel. For those of you that love Hebrew, there it is. I've provided it for you. Take a picture. When you look at what a goel is, this is the same word that is used for God during the Exodus. In Exodus chapter 6, verse 6, it says, therefore, tell the Israelites, I'm the Lord. I will bring you out from the forced labor of the Egyptians and rescue you from slavery to them. Here's the word, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and great acts of judgment. When you think about what it means to come into God's abundance and God's provision, it's like you're holding up an umbrella in the rain. If you're standing out from under the umbrella and you're getting hosed, it's like you shouldn't be surprised. You're not functioning under the covenant blessings of God, right? You stepped out. But what you have in this story here is that you have a provision here. It's the same that was true of Adam and Eve when they lost Eden. They had a space. It was a space of abundance where the family was intact. They had means of provision. And then when they chose to walk away from God, it says they went east out of Eden, which meant they walked out from under the umbrella. And everything that came with it started to pour down. Family life started to break. Started to have a hard time finding food and means of provision. It was just a chaotic mess. The only way back in is when you have a Goel. It's when you have a redeemer. The same word also means a protector. And what that shows is Boaz in this moment is choosing, when you think about it, to enter into the chaos of Naomi and Ruth and say, I'm gonna protect you. I'm gonna take care of you. And then when you think of Jesus, what that means for him is when we're going to be celebrating Christmas here in a little bit, that when he came to the earth, he entered into the chaos and says, I'm going to do something about this. And you can find protection and shelter under the provision of my wings. Same for Boaz, same word picture that you're getting for Jesus. Redemption is to rescue someone from slavery as well as to rescue the land itself. I want you to think about this. You go back into the fall in Genesis. It wasn't just the soul that broke. I mean, that broke. But it says all of creation broke with it. The whole thing broke. I want to give you just two examples of this from Scripture. I want you to think about the brokenness of the land. In Romans 8:19-23, listen to what Paul said. The creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its enslavement to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning together as it suffers together the pains of labor, and not only the creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit, we groan inwardly while we wait for the adoption and the redemption of our bodies. We wait for redemption. That's the land. I want you to think about us, Romans 6:17-18. Thank God that although you used to be slaves of sin, you obeyed from the heart the pattern of teaching to which you were handed over. And having been set free from sin, you became enslaved to righteousness. You once were a slave to sin, and now you've been freed from it. The land was broken. You were broken. The land will be restored. You can be healed. Your soul can be healed. All of this is the word picture of what a Goel does. Like Boaz, I want you to think about this. God provides for us from his own abundance. That's what God does. He provides for us from his own abundance. But I think we've got to pay attention to something that happened earlier in this chapter. You've got Boaz. You know, he's already got the field. It's his, right? And he's an honorable man. He's a good man. And he's set the edge. And then you got this young woman named Ruth that walks up. Tough situation. And she comes up to his field and she finds abundance and provision. She sits with him at the table and she eats and has abundance and even leftovers. That picture of Boaz is the picture of Jesus. The thing is, you have to come to the field. You have to come to the field. You know, Ruth came to a place where she knew that there was provision, a means of grace, a means of favor, a means of blessing from someone that wants to do good for someone when they're in a particularly difficult time. It's like a little bit of heaven in the midst of all the mess. And when you think of what that means for your relationship with Jesus, it means this, is that just like Ruth came to the field, you have to come to him. He is your means of grace. He is your means of protection. He is your means of provision. He is your means of salvation. And under him, just like this picture in Ruth chapter 2, under his wings, you will find his blessing, his favor. You will find his rest. You will find it. It isn't anywhere else. You'll find it.
We hope you have enjoyed the podcast. For more information about our church, visit www.woodridge.org.